Councillor Wathen, you're able to begin.
Thank you very much, Louise. Welcome to everybody to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting on the 11th of May. I note that, of course, it is not a subcommittee as on the agenda paper there, just a minor point. Okay, so apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Richard Gale and Sylvia Hobbs.
Hello. Yeah,
Thank you very much. Sorry? Was somebody else commenting there, please?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then to minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of January. You have those in front of you, colleagues. Can I take those as an accurate record of that meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Peter?
I wasn't there, Chairman, so I can't vote, can I?
No. Okay, so Peter, do you agree they're an accurate record?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Alex, I believe you said you do.
I do.
And I was the only other person present now that was present then, so yes, I agree. So they are an accurate record of that meeting. And I will sign those at some point in the future. Next item, to receive any declarations of interest. I have nothing to declare.
I have nothing to declare.
I have nothing to declare, Mr. Chairman.
Nor have I, Chairman.
Thank you.
Neither I. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Rosalie. Thank you. Questions by members under Council Procedure Rule 10.3.
Chairman, there were no questions received.
Thank you very much. Which takes us on, well, colleagues, we've got an oral report from the Head of Environmental Services. I don't know if he's actually live with us at the moment. Rather than him hang on till almost the end of the meeting, would it be kind to let him come in next? First of all, is it Mike Deacon, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Chairman.
I can't see a problem with that.
Yep, good idea.
No problem, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that sort of amendment to the order of the agenda, can I ask Mike Deacon to give his verbal report as Head of Environmental Services?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, normally under this item on the Governance and Audit Committee agenda, I would be presenting the environmental services risks, as are the normal day-to-day risks to the service and the impacts on the council. However, I'm happy to take questions on the risks as they are set out for environmental services, but one of the risks that is contained within my service or my area of responsibility is the risk related to how the council has dealt with or is dealing with the COVID-19 situation. So I would like to, again, as I said, subject to yourself and members agreeing to it, I believe members may wish to spend a little bit more time on that particular risk rather than the day-to-day environmental services risk. However, I'm happy to take direction from you on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I personally would agree with you that the COVID situation risk is more relevant. Would members agree?
Yeah.
Yep.
Agreed, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you've got the gist then. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it is obviously one of the highest risks that the council has in the present time. And what I'd like to do for members' benefit is set out what we have done as a council, or the officers on behalf of the council have done. And I'd like to break that up into the three phases of the outbreak or the pandemic to date. So the initial phase, Chairman, was the council's immediate response to the crisis. The council established new operating structures, both internally and externally, and very rapidly we had up to 70% of the workforce enabled to be working from home. An exemplary effort from the council's ICT department in facilitating and enabling council staff to do so. We closed the offices to the public, and as you are aware, and tonight is testimony to that, we reduced the number of council meetings involving members and also other officer related meetings. The office itself, East Northamptonshire House, was transformed to enable social distancing measures to be put in place for the remaining staff. We now have increased cleansing regimes, hand sanitation systems, availability of PPE for the staff that are in the offices, and bearing in mind the announcements today around return to work for many workplaces, we are already complying or satisfying many of the government guidelines with respect to safe workplaces. So those were measures that were put in very early in our response to COVID-19. The offices, as I say, are still have an officer presence. Those offices are spaced around the offices, so again recognising social distancing, and that again is another positive response from the workforce in responding to those requirements. We've also introduced new working rotas so that wherever possible we don't have too many people in the offices, and that also includes the corporate management team, where we don't have the full complement of CMT in the offices at any one time. And we have embraced the new ways of working, and we now use MS Teams for the corporate management teams. What we did do in the early days was to have corporate management team meeting twice a week, which effectively acted as the council's incident control centre, and it also enabled us to prioritise the work activity of the council. Another important thing that we did in phase one was the establishment of an information modelling and performance tool, which we collectively call the SITREP, which enables CMT to review current priorities, emerging priorities, and the levels of absenteeism amongst the workforce. And I must make a comment on that, Chairman, in that we have not realised significant numbers of absence, fortunately, due to the COVID virus. As I said, CMT now meets virtually. We've reduced that to a weekly meeting, although again we will need to consider the implications of today's guidance release from government to see whether that is retained. We've also established the county-wide governance arrangements for responding to the COVID crisis. At a high level, we have engagement at the local authority chief executive's gold meeting, and David Oliver rings into that, and both David and myself engage with the SCG, the strategic level meeting. Operationally, we also have officers involved in a variety of cells, whether they're the tactical cells, economic impact, community resilience, excess deaths, the scientific cell, the communication cell, and the social distancing cell. And we've been at the forefront of many of those cells in driving the work forward county-wide. What phase 1 has enabled us to do is to, it's provided a great deal of learning. The SIT rep, as I've mentioned, and the ability to resource manage. It's tested our business continuity plans, our arrangements, and continues to do so. And that picture, as you'll appreciate, changes by the day. We've had a very positive response, a can-do approach from officers across the board, and as I said, a low actual sickness absence. What that learning enabled us to do is to move into phase 2, which is where we are now currently, which is managing the crisis. We've now embedded the new legislation and the powers that the government have bestowed upon local authorities around social distancing, and also the duties around enabling the business funding, the distribution of business funding and business support. We have been actively involved in the community support, community resilience side, and we have our officers engaging with the distribution of support, whether it's food parcels, leafleting, or medical prescription distribution. The comms has been on top of every step of the way, and we've both been involved with maintaining regular contact with our own workforce, because as you'll appreciate, we have a workforce that is spread across. That's not mine, by the way. I don't think I've ever been interrupted at governance and audit by a barking dog, but there you go. There's a first for everybody. Where was I? Pressures and challenges. That was that point. That was a good point. So yes, we face, as a council and as a community, we face several pressures and challenges, and much of it has been well publicised. The closures of the household waste recycling centre in Rushden. We've seen increased fly tipping activity. The housing team have had to be engaged in the work around the rapid accommodation of rough sleepers and the homeless, and your environmental health officers are now engaged with the response to the care homes crisis. And we are now capable of adapting to the new surges and challenges as they arise. The next big one, the significant one emerging for particularly my department, is the emerging contact tracing phase of the crisis. So with regards to the day job and what the council is doing about that, we've paused some services, and we're now looking at what we can restart, when we can restart them, and what dependencies they rely upon. And we're starting to make arrangements and plans for how we do this safely, and that includes reviewing all the risks across the council to reflect the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on council services going forward. And when I say going forward, we go into phase 3, which will be the transition to recovery and the future, heavily influenced by today's announcements and the guidance, which we await further guidance this week, which will dictate many areas that we'll be expected to get involved with, not least of which will be the return of some of our officers into the East Northamptonshire workplace. However, I refer to the learning from phase 1. We have learning from all the phases 1 and 2 so far, and that will be informing our planning, because there will be aspects of what we do in the future which will have benefited from what we've learnt in responding to the crisis thus far. And we wouldn't wish to go back on some of that, some of those innovations and learning, particularly as you experiencing this evening, the use of MS Teams and the ability to hold virtual meetings. So I think
I'm busy doing governance and audit on the phone,
so. Okay, so short of a tractor going across the screen, I think I'm probably ticking all the boxes of interruption. So, so at that point, Chairman, I'll probably I think it's a good point to stop and open the floor to questions from members.
Okay, well, I think you did very well with the sort of the gallery there from the background. Okay, it's one. Well, I must say it's been good that the staff have been able to adapt as quickly, and it has had to be very quick, as quickly as they have. And I know literally this morning I rang environmental services with a particular issue that a constituent had brought up. And I have to say I had an extremely prompt response. Hopefully not just because I'm a councillor. I like to think not. And, you know, the issue is being explored. So not only have they adapted well and taken on board all the many completely new things that COVID has thrown at all councils, but they are also, you know, not forgetting the day job, if you like. So really, my congratulations to them, and I would really appreciate it if you could pass that on to all of them. I think they really have, you know, shown themselves in an extremely good light. I have no particular questions of your report now. I just think it's interesting, and I'm glad to have received it. I'll just ask if any other councillor would like to ask any questions. I'll just mute my button.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Peter here, Peter Thomas.
Okay, go ahead, please, Peter.
It's through yourself, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Mike if there has been and is now sufficient PPE for all the staff.
Councillor Thomas, we were successful in obtaining some PPE to enable those officers that were requiring to go into high-risk situations. We did obtain sufficient to cover that. As I said earlier, we will need to evaluate what the implications are of the latest directions and guidance that government will be releasing to see whether we would need to obtain more PPE. At the minute, we have sufficient, but that, as I say, that may change in the next 48 hours once we realise what our next steps or the requirements are for our next steps. What I would emphasise, and I've emphasised this all along with our staff particularly, is that no member of staff be placed in any position where PPE is required and it has not been provided. They will not be forced into any position where they will not be either adequately trained or adequately equipped to deal with that situation.
Thank you, Mike. As long as the staff are happy with their position, you know, they must be kept safe at all times, and it may be that, you know, moving forward, we definitely need to be thinking about more PPE for staff, in my opinion. So I think someone needs to take a look at that and be prepared, because it's going to be essential, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was actually a very, very pertinent question, so thank you for that. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question of Mike?
No, I've got no questions. I think it's sorry, it's Alex, Councillor Smith. I think it's the difficult circumstances you faced. The council's done really well to put everything in place they needed to.
Yeah, sorry, Peter, my microphone was muted, so I couldn't get through. Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, please, Robin.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Has any member of staff caught this COVID? And secondly, how many people are working in the offices?
Okay, firstly, the first answer is no. We are not aware of any member of staff contracting the virus. If you bear with me 1 second as I find the answer to your second question, which in my living room office, so we have 27% of the staff, which equates, well, yeah, so 27% of the workforce is still working within the offices. You're now going to ask me what that equates to.
I'll accept that.
You accept that answer. Thank you, Councillor.
And I'd just like to say thank you, Mike, for your excellent report and the updated situation of the RNO in. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman, can I come back with one point of clarification? My report relates to the corporate response to COVID, not just environmental services. So I don't wish it to sound, you know, what I've relayed in the last few minutes is that the corporate response, and that the response has been excellent across the board. It's not just in environmental services. It is a corporate response to this situation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I totally agree with you there. It has been across the board, and my thanks would go across the board. But as we've got you here now, I'd like you to thank particularly your staff, obviously. Okay, are there any other questions of Mike? Okay, can I say thank you very much, Mike, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Okay, that takes us on then to item 5, the statement of accounts. So I believe, does that go over to you, Glenn?
Kelvin will be doing the introduction from the council side, and then we'll hand over to Neil Harris from EY. So over to Kelvin first.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So the report you have before you provides members with an update in respect of the council statements of accounts for the financial year 2018-19. That is the year that ended 31st of March 2019. The committee has previously received reports on the accounts at its meetings last year on the 24th of July and the 25th of September, and it was explained in those reports why the council would not be able to meet its deadline of 31st of July in respect of having an audited set of accounts. As Glenn's just explained, the report before you is essentially in 2 parts. So I guess it's a bit of a double act. The first part, contained in Appendix 1 of the report, provides members with an update in respect of the material amendments that have been made to the statement of accounts as part of the ongoing audit by EY, the council's external auditors. And then in a moment, the second part at Appendix 2 is the audit results report, which, as Glenn says, Neil Harris from EY will take you through. That's the more substantive part of the report. But just briefly in respect of part 1, and the amendments to the accounts are set out from pages 9 to 14 of your agenda, and what they show there is the revisions to the main statements from those that were last presented to the committee at its meeting on 25th of September 2019. So on page 10 you have the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and those figures highlighted in yellow are the ones that have changed. Page 11 you've got the movement in reserve statements, page 12 the balance sheet, and page 13 the cash flow statements. But if you turn to page 14, you have there an overall summary of the amendments that have been required to the prime statements. There's 6 of them that are listed there, And I would point out at this stage, and I'll say it again later, that none of those changes that are listed affect or impact on the council tax funding requirements or the previously reported net cost of services. Or to put it another way, none of them actually affect the bottom line. They're all what we might call technical accounting adjustments. Don't really intend to go through more than a lot of detail, but just briefly, the first one actually was a misstatement by the Northamptonshire Pension Fund. This was picked up as part of the audit of the pension fund. We get our figures from there. So there was an error there in terms of an overstated asset valuation. So our share of that was 63,000 that we had to adjust. The second one, in terms of valuation changes for both Twywell Hills and Stanley Lakes, these were originally classed in the accounts as what we would term other land and buildings. But it's been accepted by our staff that they now probably should have been classified, well, they should have been classed as community assets. And what that means is that a different valuation basis has to be used. Instead of using what's called existing use value basis, it has to be done on an historic cost basis. And it looks a huge figure there, nearly £11 million adjustment, but it is just that. It is an adjustment in terms of the valuation technique, and I repeat, it doesn't have any impact in terms of council taxpayers. The third one is quite simply a restatement. It was a discount on a contract, and we showed that discount as an income line. It should have just been netted off the expenditure. The fourth one is, again, a very technical thing, prior adjustments to what's called the revaluation reserve. Again, there's been a historic overstatement in there that the auditors picked up this time, and we had to do some work. It took us right the way back to 2008-9, so over 10 years ago, to do that adjustment. Fifth one, again, the valuation issue. It's the overstatement of the valuation on the Pemberton Leisure Centre, and that was an incorrect valuation applied by the council's external valuers. We appoint external valuers to do all our valuations. The last one, in terms of housing benefit debtors, again, for a number of years they've been identified as long-term debtors in the balance sheet, but it's accepted now by officers that they should have been termed as short-term debtors. So again, I'll say it for the third time, but I would reiterate, none of those amendments affect the bottom line, no impact on the council taxpayers of East Northamptonshire or its residents. Unless Neil says otherwise, in a moment there should be no more material adjustments required to the statement of accounts. What's currently happening is that, as members will be aware, the whole statement is something like 90 pages, and we're going through and amending the various other parts of the document that need amending, quite a few narrative changes, disclosure notes, and hopefully that will be completed within about the next week. We also have to put in, link back to the previous item on the agenda, some commentary on the effects of COVID-19, as of course it is what's termed a post-balance sheet event. So that's in summary from the council's perspective. They're the main changes to the accounts. From page 15 onwards, you have the auditor's report called the audit results report, and I'll hand over to Neil now, who will take you through that.
If I could just come in before Neil does take over, and if I could ask any of the councillors if they have any comments or questions of Kelvin on this first part.
Chairman, presumably, when I can find it, on the first page, does that show that we're 6 million odd in deficit? It's on page 11 at the, no it's not, it's on page 10, 6049. Does that mean we're in deficit, or am I reading that wrong? That's 6 million odd.
That's yes. Could I ask for a comment from either Kelvin or from Glenn on that?
The 6049 figure is our essentially it's the total amount of the income and the expenditure. So it's a net position, and it's the amount of the net expenditure that we would have had during the year on an accounting basis in relation to the accounting policies that we need to use when presenting the accounts.
So that says we've got more expenditure than income, does it? Or am I wrong again?
It's not quite as straightforward as that. In terms of the way that the accounts are presented, as Kelvin outlined, there's a difference between the way they're presented to the taxpayer and what hits the bottom line for the taxpayer, and how they're presented under the accounting requirements and the relevant codes and guidance that is issued. So the figure that of the 6049 is the net expenditure position for the year, and you know, as you can see there, as is outlined, then we've spent, the cost of services is about £12 million, 12.137. We get income in from a number of sources, including government and also the council taxpayer. And then the difference between the two essentially is the surplus or deficit that's arising on the accounts, and the total of all those added together comes to your £6 million.
Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Glenn and Kelvin. Are there any other questions on this first part?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Peter here. I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to ask a question, if I may, regarding the amendments on page 14, item 4. This adjustment to the revaluation reserve. Why has it taken so long to pick this up?
Probably very difficult for me to answer that one, Chair. All I can say is it was never picked up by previous auditors, but as I've only joined the council a couple of months ago, I don't know whether Glenn wants to maybe add something to that.
I think in terms of what you said there, Kelvin, is correct, because we've had new auditors in this year. The testing has been very different than previous years, and what we've found is you know, a number of areas within the accounts that we've had either to you know, change our interpretation of the accounting policy, and also gone through a number of historic issues in order to make sure that they're reported in the right way going forwards. And this one, as I say, did go back to 2009.
And of course, just, you know, following various sort of public scandals, big companies like Carillion going out, the whole business of how all external auditors look at our accounts now has changed, and there is far greater delving into things. So yes, they have picked up on past mistakes. It hasn't sort of affected, as Carmen says, the bottom line over the time. It's just how you, what pot you put various sums of money into. Any other questions, please? Okay, now I'm just looking at the recommendations on each of these, trying to shuffle masses of paper in front of me, which can be a bit tricky at times. In terms of the recommendations, the first two, correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, relate to the statement of accounts. So would it be logical to take those first two recommendations now?
Chair, if I could just say, I think it'd be worth hearing from the external auditor, from Neil Harris, first, before considering the recommendation, so you get the complete picture as the committee.
Okay, I'm happy to be guided by you on that particular one. Okay, so we're going to page 15 of this particular section, and then over to you, Neil.
Okay, Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Neil Harris. I'm the External Audit Engagement Lead from EY for East Northamptonshire Council. And first of all, can I just start by a warm thanks to the officers for all of the cooperation and assistance that my team have had throughout the audit, but I think particularly recently, in light of COVID-19, that's presented increasing challenges, I think, for both the officers of the council and for ourselves as external audit to continue to reach a conclusion on the external audit of the financial statements. But I do want to pass on my thanks, given all the challenges, for the cooperation we've had from the finance team and from NCOR to get us to a stage where we are now near to the conclusion of our audit and the issuing of the audit opinion. And I also am very heartened to hear about all the steps the council's taken in response to COVID-19 as well. It's, from an external audit perspective, very good to hear all of the hard work that the council's putting in response to a very challenging and unprecedented set of circumstances. It's been good that Kelvin's joined the council, because I think Kelvin's provided an excellent approach to project management of the work that the council's finance team and NCOR have been doing to respond to the audit, and a link with my audit team. And I think in that vein, members, I would say that Kelvin's update on the amendments to the statement of accounts is consistent with the audit results report that you have from ourselves on the financial statements. So what we sought to do with the audit results report is provide an annotation, which you will see in a combination of red and blue text, of those changes to the audit results report that you'll have received from me before. And the vast majority of those changes are to confirm the amendments that have been agreed to the financial statements, all of which that Kelvin has set out and summarised very comprehensively. So I don't wish to, they're very consistent with my knowledge, and therefore I don't wish to repeat what Kelvin's already said. I would also confirm that whilst we're now into the final, what I would call final review and closure procedures on our external audit, I certainly do not anticipate any further material amendments being made to the financial statements, and I'd be very happy to support a recommendation from the officers to you as members to reach a delegation now for any further matters that need to be considered before the accounts are authorised for issue, and I issued my audit opinion. I suppose the only items I want to draw out as matters that probably come across as new to this committee are those items that I just need to consider before I issue the audit opinion. So the first, as Kelvin's already set out, is to do with the disclosures associated with COVID-19, and the background to this is recognising a post-balance sheet event, but there's clearly a non-adjusting event. Nobody could have foreseen these circumstances at 31st of March 2019, but we would expect a recognition of the impact of COVID-19 in your financial statements at the point at which they're being authorised for issue. I suppose the second reason why we're asking for a disclosure on the impact of COVID-19 is at the point at which the accounts are authorised for issue. Glenn, as your responsible financial officer, is signing the accounts to say that those represent a going concern, and that looks out the next 12 months. So that's more of a forward-looking statement rather than a backward-looking statement. And what we're asking for as part of the conclusion of the audit is as best an estimate as the council can provide on the impact of COVID-19 on your financial position, and just to conclude collectively that there isn't any material uncertainty on the council continuing to operate as a going concern. Just to manage expectations on this, I'm not anticipating there to be any material uncertainty at all. This is just more about the adequacy of the disclosures, and that those would be consistent with my knowledge and the information that the council's providing, I know, on an ongoing basis to MHCLG. And as part of, as you mentioned, Councillor Wethern, on the I suppose the scrutiny on the audit profession at the moment, in light of COVID-19, there was a moratorium that was issued by all the professional services firms in response to recommendations from the Financial Reporting Council, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Bank of England, which was lifted in the middle of April. But that moratorium was just allowing some adjustment so that organisations could understand as best as they could the impact of COVID-19, and reflected those disclosures in their financial reports. and it expects external auditors to do a little bit of stress testing on those disclosures to make sure that there are no concerns we need to report on. So I will need to consult with our professional practice team on the disclosure that the council's putting in its accounts and what work I've done to make sure I'm happy that the council can sign its accounts as a going concern, and I'll be going through that process within the next couple of weeks once I get the updated set of accounts and disclosures from Glenn and Kelvin. So that's the position on C19. The other matter we've identified in the audit results report is that whilst I am more than happy to be in a position to issue the opinion on the 18-19 financial statements, and also concluding that the council has adequate arrangements for economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources, which is our value for money conclusion, we will be delaying our certificate closing the audit, and that is just in light of considering a whistleblower referral that I received during the course of the audit. Now, it's important to say that in the context of that whistleblower referral, that this is already the subject to a number of external investigations that has been commissioned by the council and through the council's solicitors. So I don't propose to go through the details of that any more than what I've just confirmed here. I just want to be absolutely clear that the matters that have been referred to me have no relevance to any balances within the financial statements, or indeed to any decisions that were made in the 18-19 financial year. They relate to past decisions and actions which have been drawn to my attention as the external auditor. And because they have a link to our wider statutory duties and responsibilities, I have a duty to at least consider those points, but I'm not going to do so until I see the outcome of the council's commissioned external investigations, and that's not going to conclude before I issue the opinion on the accounts. Now, to Kelvin's point earlier, this is a technical point. This has no impact on the overall view on the council's financial position or on its value for money arrangements, or generally on the state of its accounts at the point at which my opinion is issued. It's purely a technicality to enable me to consider a matter on an ongoing basis until I'm in a position to come back to you as a committee. Beyond that, Chair, I suppose the only other point to raise, which will probably be in the final reckoning with the accounts and signed letters of representation that need to come from this committee and from the officers, is that we do expect one unadjusted misstatement on the financial statements, and that's to do with the difference between the notes within the cash flow statement of 340,000. Again, to reiterate what Kelvin says, none of that difference does not impact on the bottom line, but in reconciling the cash flow statement to the supporting notes, there is a reconciling difference which cannot be resolved, and I'm happy to accept we've done sufficient audit procedures that this will be the difference, and we would be asking management to represent why the accounts won't be amended, and for you as a committee at the point at which the accounts are authorised to state why to prove why the accounts are not going to be amended. And that's a procedural point you would need to go through. It doesn't again have any bearing on my overall audit opinion.
That I believe is on page 21.
Page 21, yes. So
thank you.
So with that, Chairman, members of the committee, I'm happy to take any questions. Just in closing, though, I do want to once again thank the officers for all of the cooperation and support, and I would say perseverance. I think on many occasions, really, to get to where we are today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. That was very concise. I've been through it with my usual fine-tooth comb, and I won't worry you now with the grammatical errors, which I usually pick up on. Sorry about that. There we are. It's good to hear that things are looking good, even though that we are in such sort of uncertain times. And we look forward to an unqualified opinion. Is that fair to say?
It is, and I think thereafter we need to move very rapidly into 1920. I'm very conscious of the not only COVID you're trying to grapple with in Northamptonshire, but there's also the transition to new unitary councils over the horizon as well. So, you know, it's important that I work with Glenn and Kelvin to have a probably what I describe as a wash-up meeting about how do we set in place a good framework for getting the 1920 audit completed in a shorter period than we've been able to do for 18-19, and mutually agreed to that as well.
I agree. I think that's going to be very important, given, as you say, the situation we're here moving to unitary in April next year. Okay, colleagues, are there any questions for Neil?
If I may, Chairman, it's Robin.
Yes, please, Robin, go ahead.
You seem to use your own companies to value the assets that this council has, which in some instances has led to a different conclusion than what the council uses for valuing its assets. Who's right and who's wrong?
That's it's a fair question, Councillor Underwood, and I think all I would say, and the chairman raised this very cogently earlier, is there's been an increasing level of professional and regulatory expectation on external audit, and the audit testing we do on valuations is something that, in my experience as an external auditor, has incrementally increased year on year, certainly over the past 3 years, and there's a lot more of an expectation that we would test the underlying assumptions that your valuer would come up with in the valuation of your assets. And I think what's compounded is this is our first year as your auditor, so we have used our real estate team to support me and the audit team to test some of the assumptions and methodologies that have been used by Wilkes, Head and Eve, and you'll see in the audit results report we've expressed some concerns on some aspect of their methodology, and I think in fairness to the officers there's been a readiness to accept the challenge in some areas and to push back in others. So I think we've reached a position of agreement on the changes in valuations that are needed, though generally I accept the challenge that sometimes where there's not a concern on the classification of an asset or some of the underpinning assumptions that have been used in the methodology, you can sometimes find our valuer coming up with one range and the value and your valuer coming up with another range, and that's where I find the bigger challenge is how do you square that difference between two specialists, particularly when the officers and the external auditor are sitting in the middle trying to work that one out. But I think in this particular case I actually think we raised some legitimate challenges on some of Wilkes, Head and Eve's methodology, and in some places the classification of assets, as Kelvin's already run through. So I think there's a difference with what we've reported here this year at East Northamptonshire.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
I think actually the challenge that has come to our previous valuations and our previous valuers methodology actually has been very useful, and anything that enables us and makes us look deeper into our assets and, as I say, their valuations, it's got to be a good thing. So I think actually it's been quite a positive experience. Is there anybody else who wants to come in with a question for Neil?
No.
I take that as a no. Glenn, is there anything you wish to add?
Not at this point, apart from it's worth going back to the recommendations within the report and considering those.
I totally agree with you. I have my hand on them as we speak. Gosh, I don't know why it's more difficult doing it here than in the council chamber. I've managed to keep track of papers. Okay, so colleagues, the recommendations at 10.1 are as follows. To approve the amendment to the statement or amendments to the statement of accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2019. Are we happy to approve those? Could you please indicate?
Yes, Chair,
Yes.
happy to approve.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to approve.
Thank you very much. To delegate authority to the Chief Finance Officer in consultation with the Chairman of Governance and Audit to make any further amendments necessary to the Statement of Accounts 2018-19 prior to publication. Are we happy to approve that?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And the final recommendation, to note the content of the audit results report produced by the Council's external auditors, EY. Are we happy
Duly
to?
noted, Chair.
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Yes, I agree.
Thank you very much indeed, colleagues, on what was quite a lengthy part of our agenda there. So let's all find where we should be next, which is the internal audit progress and performance. So, Neil, thank you very much. You're most welcome to stay if you wish, or
I'll stay. I think you've got an urgent item at the end, haven't you? On that's subject of audit fees. We always.
Yeah. Oh gosh, thank you. Yes. I don't know why you regard that as of interest. I'm not sure.
I'll stay for that.
Thank you. Right. So the next item, then, as I say, is the internal audit progress and performance. So please, over to you, Rachel.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed.
Good, brilliant. Okay, so the first committee paper I have for you this evening is the progress and performance report from the internal audit team. So this report was produced as at the 6th of March. So it does stand as at that point. Obviously, the committee will receive a full copy of the annual internal audit report at the next meeting, which will report on all of the remaining audit assignments from the plan at the completion of the financial year. So as the report stood at the time of the 6th of March, a copy of the full report is provided as usual as Appendix A to your report. So drawing your attention to some of the key sections within the report. In section 2.5, we talk about the implementation of audit recommendations from previous assignments. So I'll come back to that in a little while in terms of a summary on those. On page 2.3 is an update on the completion of audit reports that were finalised since the last meeting. So the first of those was in relation to the main accounting system. So this is an annual report, an audit that we perform every year at the end of the financial year to look at the management of the council's financial systems, looking at particularly key controls in relation to things like bank reconciliations, new account codes, and how we're transferring money between codes via journals. So briefly, just to talk through the key findings, it was a positive outcome on the audit. So we've been able to confirm that key controls were operating effectively in those areas, and there were no significant areas of concern to raise to the committee's attention. So overall, for the design of the control environment, we've given substantial assurance, our highest rating. And for compliance, we've given good assurance with only a few areas for improvement, mainly around record keeping. So only a minor risk, no issues there that would impact upon my annual opinion at year end. The second report that's summarised for you within the paper this evening is on temporary workers. So here we were looking at particularly temporary resource that the council takes on in the form of agency workers and contractors primarily. So the sample we looked at covered both of those forms of temporary staff. And we looked at everything from how we engage those workers, how we go through the procurement process and do the relevant checks. But also we wanted to look at the council's compliance with the IR35 tax legislation, which changed in recent years, to make sure that we were complying with the roles and responsibilities in relation to that. So unfortunately, due to some lack of guidance really in terms of procedures at the council in how they appoint agency staff and contractors, we were only able to give a limited assurance opinion at the time of the audit in relation to the design of the control environment. We've made a number of recommendations in the action plan about how we can strengthen that going forward, which has all been agreed. In terms of compliance, again, there were a few issues, and we have identified some issues around those IR35 rules and making sure we're consistently evidencing compliance with those rules and regulations. and a number of areas for improvement. So we have given a moderate risk overall, bearing in mind the amount of money that's being spent on temporary staff at this point and the fact that we need those controls in place. But as I say, an action plan is in place with high priority recommendations to address all of those areas. So just to run through again, so a copy of the full internal audit plan is provided in table 1 from page 5 of your appendix. And this shows all of the assignments that have been completed. Some of those have already been presented at previous committee meetings. And obviously we've got the new ones in there that we've discussed this evening as well. As just to reiterate, those that haven't been completed as at the time of this report will be fully reported on at the next meeting when I bring you my annual report and opinion for the year 2019-20.
Rachel,
sorry, was there any question at that point?
Yeah, Rachel, if I could, I'm looking at the cyber security consultancy support. It talks about underway. I thought, well, we certainly had the an audit report. Is this something of follow-up?
This is my attendance at the working group meetings that I've attended and support that I've been providing to the council in between in terms of recommending how some of those actions be implemented and some of the support I've been providing in those areas.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, so this was brought in because the report was issued in the last financial year, so this support was in this financial year to give some support in taking those issues forward.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
Is
there any other questions at all on the audit assignments before I move on to the implementation of actions?
No.
Any questions from anybody so far?
No.
No.
Okay.
No, nothing from the chair.
No.
Lovely.
Okay,
So moving on to tables 3 and 4 in the report. This is an update on the implementation of recommendations arising from our audit reports. So I'm pleased to report that since the last meeting, we've confirmed that 27 actions have been completed, and all of those are of high and medium priority. We do still have a number of overdue audit recommendations, which are broken down in table 3, and we are continuing to monitor those with management. And some of those are, we have been advised, are nearing completion or complete, but we're just pending completion of the evidence to be able to enable us to sign those off. So what I have provided in table 4 is a summary of all of those audit recommendations which are overdue, and the latest update and a revised date for completion where appropriate. So again, I won't run through all of those, but I'm happy to take any questions on any of the specifics.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Am I correct, or are we correct in saying that the number of recommendations still to be cleared 46? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, because I think in the paper we hear, I think it suggests 73, but I don't think, obviously that's not completely up to date, whether my paper...
Sorry, just to confirm, on the 73 is the total which includes the implemented actions. So if we look at table 3, the first line have been implemented and there's 27 of those. And then the second line and the third line, the 11 and the 35, are overdue.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Are there any questions anybody wants to ask? Okay.
No more questions, Chair.
Yep, carry ahead.
No, I said no more questions, Chair.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't hear the no bit. Okay. Rachel, if you'd like to carry on.
Okay, and the rest of the report sets out the performance of the internal audit team. So as at the time of reporting in March, we had 100% of the audit recommendations underway, and in order to complete the audit plan that we agreed at the start of the year. And also provided in table 2 on page 11 is a summary of the satisfaction opinions we'd received on our audits as well, with the vast majority of those being either outstanding or good. So overall performance has been strong. And again, there'll be further detail on that in the annual report at the next meeting. So I think that's everything I wanted to draw your attention to in that paper, but I'm happy to take any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions. I mean, the various overdue items we've raised, various officers and levels, and would like to see things get going and get sorted out very quickly. I was pleased to see that there are quite a number that are said to be completed, and obviously you've still got to see the evidence on those, but I'm hopeful and confident that that evidence will be forthcoming, so that by the time we have our next meeting, that number will have gone down quite considerably. Are there any questions anybody else wishes to ask?
No, Mr. Chairman.
In that case, can I move to 13.1, the recommendation that we note the progress and performance of the internal audit service and the key findings from audits delivered during the period. Agreed?
Duly noted, Chair.
Noted, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's move on then to the next item on our agenda, which is the Internal Audit Plan 2020-21. Back to you again, Rachel.
It is. Thank you, Chair. So again, this paper was due to be brought to the Governance and Audit Committee in March. And so this was produced before the COVID-19 pandemic kicked off. So we're looking to bring this plan to the committee, as we always do at that time of the year, to approve what we will be using our resources to deliver during the next 12 months. So the plan went through the process that we agreed at the end of the last calendar year in terms of producing a risk-based audit plan. So it was basically looking at risk registers, at your corporate plans, and all of those key areas set out within the report, which goes into more detail on that. The resulting plan is provided as Table 1 from pages 6 and 7 of the appendix. But I suppose what I need to explain to the committee at this point in presenting this is that whilst this is the audit plan that we had hoped to bring to you for delivery from the 1st of April, under the circumstances, I have been in extensive conversations with senior management, particularly with Glenn as Section 151 officer and the chair of this Governance and Audit Committee about the role of internal audit at this point, and the fact that a number of these audits we're not able to currently work on, either because the officers are not available because of the response to the pandemic, or because we just don't want to produce any additional disruption at this time. We are also working in a very different risk environment as well. So whilst this is the plan that we had hoped to bring to the committee for approval, we're not currently working to this plan, but we are endeavouring to identify any audits as we can that we can commence, which will not have any impact on wider service delivery and which will continue to add value in the current risk environment as well. So we're looking at actively to identify those in consultation with the chair and the Section 151 officer. So what I'm looking for the committee to do really is to endorse the plan that we had hoped to bring to you as in principle, this is what we will deliver when we're able to, but I do think we also need to be conscious that the plan needs to be flexible to respond to a very different changing risk environment over the next 12 months. And we also need to be mindful that some of these assignments may need to drop off to enable us to support other risks in the next few months as well. So, as I say, that's this position at this point compared with when we had hoped to bring the paper to you. So there is a copy of that draft audit plan. As I say, we'll hope to make a start on some of these audits, but we may need to reprioritise. And I think we will need to completely re-review the plan once we come out of the other end of this situation we're currently going through, and make sure that we're still adding value with the assignments we're planning. So I'd still appreciate the committee's support in the areas we've identified, but I will be bringing a refreshed plan later in the financial year to confirm exactly where we plan to deploy our resources. I don't plan to go through all of the assignments that have been set out in the draft plan, but just to draw your attention to a few of those that the committee may be interested in. We are proposing to do some follow-up work on cybersecurity, also on asset management and GDPR, So these are 3 areas that have been flagged to the committee in previous audit plans, and we're looking to give you some assurance over areas of improvement since the last assignment was completed. We also have the standard annual testing in terms of key financial controls and procurement compliance and some of those key systems. But otherwise, as I say, we may well need to review the plan based on where we are in terms of risk after we come out of the other end of this current situation. So I'm happy to take any questions on the draft plan or the process that I followed in developing it, and or any wider questions really on the report.
Thank you very much. I don't know who in the background is opening cans of Coke or something, but it's making me feel very thirsty. Seems that sort of sound anyway from somewhere. I think Rachel's points are very well made. Given the situation we're in, this plan has to be, as it has every year really, but this year especially, flexible and adapt to the situation ongoing. I know from my own personal point of view, yes, the follow-ups on cybersecurity, asset management and GDPR are important, and I'd like to see those prioritised as much as possible, given the situation we find ourselves in. But apart from that, I'm sort of perfectly happy with Rachel's plan. So I'll throw it open for any questions or comments.
I'd like to make a comment, Chair. So it's Glenn speaking. I'd like to make a comment, if that's okay, just to add to what Rachel has said. Rachel's outlined there that certainly the impact of COVID has affected the audit plan. I think it is worth just mentioning though that Rachel and her team have input into a number of the additional processes and procedures that the council have had to undertake as a result of COVID-19. For example, the payment of grants to businesses. There's been a number of conversations that have happened between Rachel's team and our revenues team to make sure that our processes are up to scratch, and making sure that we identify and do the appropriate checks and due diligence for any fraudulent claims that may be made during this period. And I think also there will be further work that's going to be required in response to those COVID activities and processes that that we've been doing as a council, where Rachel and her team will be able to flex the audit plan to have a look at. And then I think the final one that I just wanted to mention was there is some days set aside within the plan for the preparations for unitary. At the moment, we don't quite know the timing of when those will need to be undertaken or what they will incur, but it is something that is being built into audit plans of all councils around Northamptonshire. And it will be something that can be taken forward and we'll need to decide on later in the year. And it's because of those, I suppose, uncertainties with the audit plan that we require a bit more flexibility this year. So one of the recommendations that you'll be considering later is to provide a delegation to myself in consultation with the chair of the committee in order to flex the audit plan and make sure that we can be quite responsive during the year. And what we will do is through this report at future committees, we'll report back to Rachel or through Rachel in terms of how progress is going and where we have needed to flex the plan if needed. Hopefully that just adds a little bit more context to the recommendation in the report itself.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Yes, I totally agree with that. We have got to be totally flexible, and yeah, emergency stuff like COVID has got to sort of take priority. And I know Rachel's team has been very helpful in what's been going on so far. Pleased to hear that. Are there any other questions or comments anybody wishes to make? I'll take that as a
No.
Okay, I'll take that as a no. So let's move to the recommendation, which is in two parts. The committee reviews and approves the audit plan for 2020/21. And two, the committee gives delegated authority to the Section 151 officer to, in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Governance and Audit, agree amendments to the plan during the financial year if required. Can I have your agreement to that proposal?
You can agree on both points, Chair.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed, Mr. Chairman.
Great, Robin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that is all agreed there. So let's move on then to the next part of the agenda, which is on page 87 of your papers, and that is the grant certification 2018-19. Okay, is this you, Neil, again?
No, it's Lucy taking this paper.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Lindsay. My apologies. Over to you.
Thank you. So this report summarises the results of the work undertaken by the Council's external auditor, EY, on the certification of the Council's housing benefit subsidy claim, the certified value of which was 16.3 million. So at 2.2, it details the certification work and what that included. So agreeing standard rates such as allowances and benefit incomes to the Department for Work and Pensions, circular communicating the value for each rate for the year, sample testing of benefit claims to confirm that the entitlement had been calculated correctly and supported by appropriate evidence, confirming that the subsidy claim had been prepared using the correct benefits system software, and also completing testing in relation to modified scheme payments and verifying accurate completion of the claim form. Now, full details of the certification work and findings can be found in Appendix 1, but to summarise, out of all the work, one error was found in relation to the initial testing of a modified scheme payment. This resulted in an overstatement of £120.26. So we claimed £120.26 too much than what we should have. Due to the error, the auditors carried out further testing on all modified scheme payments, and no additional errors were found. So it was just a one-off ring-fenced error that was found. So the report to the DWP, we had to confirm the error that was found, and obviously they recovered this money from our future subsidy payments. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We've all got the report there and the various papers from EY. Seem to manage to generate an awful lot of paper. Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, I take that as a general no. I certainly am not, and I'm, you know, I can say if our only error was 120 quid, given what we were dealing with, 16 million, I think was said. I think that is certainly extremely forgivable. So congratulations to the team for all their efforts and for keeping us on the straight and narrow. And I'll go straight to the recommendations, which our members are asked to note the contents of this report and the certification of grants and returns for 2018-19.
Duly noted, Chair.
Duly noted.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, duly noted.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, let's move on then to page 97, which is the risk management update. Quickly get that myself. There we are. Okay, so who's taking this one, please?
That's me, Chairman. It's Catherine Hayward here.
Oh, hello, Catherine.
Hello. Good
Okay.
evening.
Good evening to you. Okay, let's go then.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm presenting here the risk management update as at Q3 2019-20. The Q3 risk management update report is presented to this committee for information. It's the risk report which was due to be presented to the meeting on the 25th of March, which was then subsequently rescheduled. So the report was actually finalised on the 17th of March. The major new risk noted in the report, which arose in Q4, relates to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The risks to life and health in the current coronavirus outbreak and the impact of lockdown restrictions and social distancing measures on staff, residents, the wider community, businesses and the economy will have a very significant impact on many of the Council's existing risks. CMT and other risk managers are working on a full review and update of risks for the Q4 report to be presented at the next meeting of this committee. As you've already heard this evening, the Head of Environmental Services has provided a verbal update on the Council's response to the ongoing COVID-19 and the risk management activities which are ongoing on a daily basis in relation to this COVID-19 risk which has been identified. The committee is recommended to note the status of Q3 risks included in the appendix to this report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. Looking at RM Corporate 015, which relates to cyber issues, note that that's sort of very much in the middle, yet we still do have some issues outstanding from various recommendations on that one. Quite a few, I think. So just what sort of consideration was given to keeping that at a level, and that level current score is 8.
I think that risk score was kept at the level of 8 based on the ongoing work of the working party. I don't know if Kelvin, you want to add anything with regard to that risk.
It was kept as an 8 check. Don't forget, this was as at the end of December, when obviously things were moving in terms of cyber security. Obviously, there was a little bit of a hole then because of the ICT team being overtaken by all the COVID response. But I think, as I indicated at last working party, the new ICT business manager, Rob Scott, and myself are now picking up all the outstanding recommendations from cyber security. And although it still take a while, hopefully they will all clear in the next couple of months, Chair.
Could I add something as well, Chair?
Yes, please do.
This was a particular risk that has been with us for quite a while, and it is one that has come down over the course of the last 12 months. So it was higher than an 8 and has been reduced down to where it is at the moment. There will be obviously an element of inherent risk in there. So certainly our actions that we're taking in terms of cyber security have definitely had an effect and will continue to, but inevitably there'll be an underlying inherent risk that we won't be able to remove as a council, but we'll need to make sure that we keep on top of and make sure that we mitigate and minimise any cyber attack risk that we would have as a council.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Any questions from anybody, please?
No, I've got no questions, Chair.
No questions, Mr. Chair.
No questions, Chairman.
No questions, Chairman.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to move straight to the recommendation. The committee is recommended to note the current status of risks included in the period, or in the report, for the period to December 2019. Is that still the correct date, Catherine?
Yes, Chairman, because it does relate to the Q3 risks.
Okay, so to December 19. Agreed? Everybody?
Yes, duly
agreed.
noted.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. Right, let me find my agenda. Okay. Brings us next to the, excuse me, the urgent item that was added to the agenda, and that is the fee scale for the audit 2020-21. So, who is leading on that one, please, from the officer's side?
I am, Chair.
Okay, over to you then, Glenn.
Okay. The reason for this being an urgent item on the agenda and not included within the agenda when it was issued was we received this letter literally the day after the agenda had been published from the public sector audit appointments. And it is something that we felt you needed to be aware of as the committee, hence the reason for it being included as an urgent item. The letter sets out the not just the scale fee for the audit for 2021, but also gives an update on the 1920 audit as well. I think there are a couple of areas I'd just like to mention within the letter. First of all, just to note on the second page that the level of the scale fee for the 2021 financial year is the same as it is or has been in the 1920 financial year. So there's no planned increase. On page 3, you will note that there is the potential for fee variations. These will very much be driven by a risk-based assessment from the external auditor, EY. And Neil may want to comment on that or respond to any questions that you may have. But you know, particularly the area around value for money will be a key area of Neil's risk considerations. I'm conscious that previously he has mentioned that moving into you know, the local government reform and moving to Northamptonshire could be a risk for the council in the 2021 financial year. And then I think the final point to note is on page 4, which is in relation to the audit impact of COVID-19. Neil did allude to a number of those items when he was talking about the signing off of our accounts. I think that the key message there is there has been a couple of actions that have been taken at a national level. Particularly changes to the timeline for signing off and approving the accounts. And you can see there in the first paragraph at the top of page 4 that the authority has to publish its draft financial statements before the end of August. Previously, it's been the end of May. And then in terms of the date for the publishing of the audited accounts, that's by the end of November, and previously that had been July. So there are some significant changes in the dates to reflect, well, a number of things. Firstly, the additional work that finance teams are doing in response to COVID, but also to make sure that from the impact that has from the audit perspective as well. And I think the other thing just to mention around COVID-19 is there will be some further disclosures that will be required in terms of setting, in terms of putting those accounts together in 1920. So that's all I had to do in terms of introducing the item. There isn't a report that goes with this. But the proposal would be in terms of for the committee to be noting the report and the letter and its contents. So happy to ask and respond to any questions that you may have to ask.
Okay, thank you very much, Glenn. Yes, note the letter, and we've had discussions on this particular letter before. My concern, obviously, is the flexibility that it creates in audit and audit costs going forward, and audit costs which might be more in the control of the auditor than ourselves. I would like to see that we keep a very close eye, and that any increases, any extra work needed is thoroughly justified and agreed before any extra costs could be incurred. Neil, I don't know if you want to comment, please.
I certainly agree with the principle there, Chair, about the basis for any variation to the fee. I'm very aware of the national letter that PSAA have been issuing to all councils on the scale fee for 1920 and 2021. I think it's probably worth me saying that the representations EY have been making in the response to the scale fee consultation by PSAA is that we don't agree with the framework in which they're retaining the scale fee at the level at which it currently is, because it's benchmarked to a level that goes back several years, back to 2010, and we think doesn't reflect the regulatory and professional environment that external auditors have been operating in now for quite some considerable time. And I think, you know, the implication of the scale fee not changing is, to your very point, Chair, that in many places external auditors will be having conversations about where they think there may be any changes to that scale fee. What we've been doing is we've been providing information to PSAA about what we think the drivers are around audit costs and regulatory and professional environment over the last couple of years especially, and our view on the benchmarking of fees. And what I'll commit to do from my point of view, and this includes the closeout of 18-19 as well, is I will have a very thorough discussion with Glenn about fees, but also I will also have a conversation with Glenn to set out up front, I think, for 1920 and 2021 about my own assessment of the council audit risk and what I think the cost of the audit should be, and have that at an earlier stage. I appreciate for 18-19 we're drawing this to a conclusion at the end of a very long process, and I'm keen to move away from that into having a conversation about what the estimated position is and working with the council on that now and moving forward, and giving you all an opportunity to state your views on what we're coming up with and why we can justify our position. But I think it's only fair that while you've taken that item, I should state what the national position is that we're taking as a firm, which isn't inconsistent with the other suppliers. Grant Thornton and BDO and Mazars, I know, are taking a very similar approach as well.
Okay, thank you. Are you suggesting there that perhaps PSAA didn't take into account the increasing requirements on auditors, the greater depth of audit that's been introduced fairly recently?
I think it's fair to say we are, and we issued a national letter. Well, this goes back, I think, a couple of months ago. I don't know whether you have seen this, Chairman, but it went through the Glenn, and if you haven't received it, I'll make sure via Glenn you do get it. But we wrote a national letter to set out our perspective on the sustainability of the audit timetable, which Glenn's already referred to, which obviously was pre-COVID, but also our view on audit fees. The tender that we all participated in was done in 2016, and it's fair to say that was before the changes that have been happening in the professional and regulatory environment over the last couple of years. So it's probably fair to say that when the contract was first awarded, PSAA took account of the position at that particular point in time. Saying is that we would have expected that to be reflected in the scale fee consultations that have come out. Now PSAA, and I speak to PSAA as much as Glenn and you do, but you know, PSAA's view on that is that we can't take a blanket view across the sector, it depends on individual circumstances in each individual entity, and there may be some merit in that, but unfortunately that only means that all auditors up and down the country are going to be having on regular discussions of this nature on fees, and I just want to move to a stage where we're having a more regular update with you as a committee on what that is looking like, rather than set piece events at the end of an audit.
Okay, that would seem to suggest that this whole PSAA scheme is not something that you would have put in place yourself, because again, you're talking about councils being in individual circumstances, which I quite understand, but it was put forward as a national scheme, and we and the vast majority of councils, I believe, signed up to it, and you and others as auditors signed up to. So
yep,
I'm not quite sure who should be driving what.
No, I agree. So I think we've said in our response to the consultation that PSAA have been issuing that we think it's an opportunity for PSAA to set out what they think any revisions to the baseline fee should be to reflect the environment that we've seen over the last couple of years. Obviously, the letter that you've had recognises some of those challenges, but doesn't propose any change to the baseline fee. It says that will be covered by variations. So what you're left with the position of then, Chairman, is individual conversations happening to reflect what each individual auditor thinks they need to do in each individual council, which as I say, there's some merit in that, but there's some baselining that I think is expected from all auditors on areas such as valuations, pensions, value for minimum standards on the work we need to do on the value for money conclusion and the like. So we'll continue to share information with PSAA about what we think the drivers of costs are and what we think the baseline fees should look like. And as I say, I want to have that conversation with Glenn once the 18-19 audit is concluded, to have a look at fees now and moving forward and bring that back to this committee. So you've got an opportunity to be part of that discussion at an earlier stage.
Okay, I think this is something that will continue to rumble onwards as we move forward. Okay, are there any questions anybody else wishes to ask of Neil or Glenn?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'm not hearing anything, so unless I'm mistaken.
That's all right, Chairman. No.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, although we don't have a formal recommendation, can I make the recommendation that we note the content of the letter? Agreed?
Yes, Chairman.
Agreed.
Thank you very much
Duly
indeed.
noted, sir.
Duly noted. Right, at this point, the committee is likely to exclude the press and public from the meeting during consideration of the following item of business in accordance with Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, because of exempt information may be disclosed. Can I have your agreement to that, please?
Yes, Chairman.
Agreed,
Yes,
Chair.
yeah, agreed.
Okay, thank you. That closes the public part of this meeting. I will pause just for a moment. I don't know if I need to.